said, I don't think that's going to be possible. She said, no, it has been done. And so I said, okay. She gave me a week to create the outline of the book. I took myself to a park in East London. Anyone know Victoria Park? Near the lake. I sat in front of the lake, and I made dua, and I said, Allah, this has come from you. This is for you. Just help me. I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I know that if you've brought this my way, then you will make it possible. You will assist me and help me. And I said, just guide my pen. Just guide me to write what you want me to put out into the world. And I created the book outline, sent it to her. She presented it at an acquisition meeting. And the same day they said they loved the idea and they sent me the contract. So that's the story. That's the story.
Do you feel like, because it is going to be in like bookshops, across the country, do you feel like if a non-Muslim picks it up, is it a good start off point? Like, did you have it in mind even? Like, this book is going to be, out there for anyone?
I did. I did. When I started writing, Sue, my project editor, said, I need you to explain certain terms because you need to understand this is going to be in Waterstones, foils, W.H. Smith. Non-Muslims could pick up this book, so we need it to be, accessible to everyone. So I did, and I thought to myself, subhanAllah, this is actually a dawah opportunity as well. And so yes, I did have to keep that in mind. And it's obviously it's a very faith-based book, as you know, you've read it, inshallah. But I've been told, and I don't know if you'll agree, Sana, by my early readers group, that non-Muslims will take from this as well. I don't know.
I definitely do. And the glossary at the end, like they need help with words, they can always go to the glossary. Because of the memoir that you've included, like it's kind of like part story, like your life, and then part just reflections on the topic of the chapters. I think
Sure.
It's good, very good piece of dawah.
Sure. What is your favourite chapter of the book, and are you able to read just a snippet from it, please?
Have your drink.
It's a bit hot at the moment. It's a bit hot.
And then. But yeah, do you
Sophia, you've heard this story so many times, haven't you, mashallah? My favourite chapter is the chapter that I found most difficult to write. I had severe writer's block with this particular chapter. And I write about this in the book. Oh, you've read the book, haven't you? Yeah, so you know. So that's my favourite chapter. Because I was actually so in August, just before I started writing. So my thing was, okay, September the 1st. You've obviously got to start something on the 1st of the month or on a Monday or something. I'll start writing this book. There are 30 days in September. 1 chapter a day. That's easy. Yeah. Unfortunately, I fell behind, and I found myself at day, I don't even know what it was. I mean, I was nowhere near the target. And then I was writing this particular chapter, and due to my job at SOAS, my children, the time that I had to write was incredibly precious because I didn't have a lot of it, and I couldn't write at home. I had to take myself out to a coffee shop or the masjid in order to be able to write. For some reason, I just couldn't write at home. And this. Oh really?
So, yeah.
Actually, my daughter is in year 13 at the moment. She's forever in the library, mashallah. And so I took myself. I finally had like a couple of hours in this coffee shop, and I thought, right, I'm gonna at least get this chapter done. And I wrote, I think it was day 18. Yeah, that was the chapter. I was on day 18, and I'm thinking. I started, no, that's not good. Tried again, no. And I was getting so frustrated. And then I'm not going to spoil it because I write about that particular experience in the book, but it ended up becoming my favourite chapter because it taught me a great lesson about acceptance. So that is the chapter on acceptance. Yeah, sure. Yeah. About that particular chapter?
It was like quantum pages.
So this book has been written in coffee shops, the mosque, in the seating area as my youngest attended a swimming class, and in the park. I carry my laptop everywhere with me, sometimes because I literally need to continue writing whenever I can to free up some time. Occasionally, I need to take myself away from my normal home environment and be somewhere quiet where the silence allows me to reflect and write. Last night, after serving up dinner, I left home and found a cafe not far from East London Mosque that was open until late. I sat down, opened my laptop, surrounded by silence, and thought, yes, I can write a chapter today. I was ready to write, but I was blank, completely blank. No words came. I began to force words out in an attempt to make the most of this precious time alone to meet my quota of writing a chapter a day. But the words just would not come. Here I was writing a chapter about the importance of acceptance in the pursuit of being present, and I had a serious case of writer's block. After nearly an hour of being frozen and a blank page with the exception of day 18, acceptance at the top, I shut my laptop, stuffed it into my tote bag, and walked defeated back to my car. In the 5-minute journey back home, I kept repeating la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. There is no might or power except with Allah. Remembering, hearing that it opens doors to pour forth. When I arrived home, I attempted to force out some thoughts, but writer's block still reigned supreme. And then a thought occurred to me. I need to accept that I'm stuck. There is no use in trying to force out words as they will not come from my heart. I want my words to come from deep within me. So I gave in and went to bed. While lying in bed, in between sleep and wakefulness, it came to me. This is how we need to start this chapter. Presence can never be a fabrication of what we feel we should do or how we feel we should be. Presence is an acceptance of who we are and where we are right now. As I drifted off to sleep, I knew tomorrow I had to start exactly then. A writer who was completely frustrated and blocked, knowing where I want to go, but completely at a standstill as to how to get there. We know we have a job to do, to worship Allah with as much presence as possible, and to do everything we can to earn His pleasure. Sometimes we'll know what steps to take, yet weighing up whether we're on track, as we did in yesterday's chapter, when we feel this way, we feel we can only show up to Allah when the block is removed. When the confusion clears, and once we know what to do next. But you see, Allah loves the humble, needy soul. We can show up to Allah in all our seasons. We show up when we know, and when we do not know. We show up when life is flowing, and when life feels like it has come to a halt. We show up by accepting where we are right now is where we need to be right now. We show up by being present with the blocks of our heart and in our life. We do that by accepting this is how we feel right now, feeling all of the emotions and allowing them to pass when they need to. These blocks on our journey are necessary. They do not prevent us from moving closer to Allah. They are like roadblocks on a journey where we need to present our identity documents to Allah and say, here I am. This is all of me. I need your help to pass on to the next part of my journey. I'm actually in tears as I write this because the very block that I experienced last night has made me revisit everything I have written thus far and change it. The chapters you have read so far were rewritten after this very moment. I identified that the block was caused by my trying to fit the chapters into a structure suggested by my editor. I emailed her to say that this did not feel right and I needed to write it in my own way. Her response was that she trusts me completely. which gave me room to change the previous 17 chapters and write the rest of the book as me in my own way. You see, this is what acceptance does. It allows for you to be who you are in every given moment. There is no mold you need to try to squeeze yourself into. There is no one universal formula. There is no script you need to adopt. It is just you as your vulnerable, honest self coming to Allah, both in flow and in block.
Thank you so much. We actually tried to figure out our own favourite chapters, but we couldn't come up with one, so we come up with three.
So you came up with three?
Yeah, as in 3 favourite chapters.
Okay, which are?
Which are on the board. So we've done day 7, which was about forgiving others. We've got day 16, unitasking, and day 25. So we just wanted to maybe talk a little bit about.
Can someone take a picture of that and send it to me or something? I like that. That's really nice. I'll show them.
Yeah, and then that was just one of the questions. Like the journal, she has questions. So that was like my favourite question. Reflected your past, what's one thing that was not granted to you or taken away from you that changed you so much for the better? I think that's just such a great question. Like whatever you are in life.
Did you journal?
I didn't.
Are you keeping it for Ramadan?
Yeah, I'm saving it for Ramadan. But yeah, and then the little bird.
That's nice. I like
this one. So yeah, for day 7, forgiving others, I think you gave quite a unique perspective on forgiveness, because sometimes I think we can, as Muslims, think about forgiveness as Allah is the all-forgiving. So if anyone's ever wronged us in whatever way, then we have to just forgive and forget and just leave it. But I think you mentioned like a way of doing it where you keep a healthy distance from the person who has wronged you while forgiving them at the same time. So you've forgiven them, but you don't have to just go back to however things were. You can keep a distance, and that's fine in Islam. And you gave an example of the Prophet Muhammad and him.
Don't give too much away.
Sorry. But yeah, maybe could you talk a little bit about the Islamic perspective of how that's it?
Yeah, I think this is, this is dunya at the end of the day. Okay, we're not, our experiences are not meant to be perfect here. That's reserved for the next life. People will wrong us, people will hurt us, people will harm us, people will let us down, and sometimes it comes at the hands of those that are meant to be closest to us. And then there is this internal battle, this battle within where Allah is, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. He is the most merciful. Surely I should be, merciful towards others. And then I think there's a balance that needs to be struck in that, yes, if the Lord of the heavens and the earth shows us mercy and is merciful to us every single day, subhanAllah, in so many beautiful ways, then surely we as limited human beings, full of mistakes and full of flaws and full of imperfection, surely we should forgive others, right? But then we're also human, and sometimes a healthy distance is needed in order for you to safeguard your soul. And this is something that I write about a lot in the book, that the most precious thing you have is your soul. You came from Allah and you're going to return to Him. It's not your family, it's not your possessions, it's not your qualifications, it's your soul. My daughter, last year when she was in year 12, one of her classmates in her form went to sleep and didn't wake up the following morning. There was nothing wrong with her. She had no health issues whatsoever. She was 17? It was just sudden. She just didn't wake up in the morning. And this is the thing. So I think when you place the hurt and pain you receive from others through that lens, you'll be able to make balanced decisions. Because, and I say this a lot in the book, we're human and we're Muslim. So we aspire to become better and do that which is pleasing to Allah. But at the same time, it's okay that you're hurt. it's okay that it's painful. It's okay that you're really actually cheesed off with that person. Yeah, you don't even want to kill that person. But it's placing the pain in that situation and the difficulty with that person behind the lens of the fact that you have your soul that is going to return back to Allah one day. So now, how am I going to look at this situation, and how am I going to deal with this person? And the answer to that question is subjective. For one person it may be, I have enough mercy in my heart to forgive. And for another person it may be, this is too harmful for me, I need to take a step back. And Allah knows. You look like you're deep in thought, Sandra.
So another favourite was for day 16, you spoke about unitasking, and I think as students we can really utilise that. So how would you suggest we use this for the month of Ramadan in particular?
I think unitasking is it's a means to be more mindful and present in whatever you're doing. And I think, you see, it goes back to your previous question. I've got your name, sorry. Halima? Naima. So it goes back to your previous question right at the beginning, what advice would you give? What changes can you make to Ramadan? And I think, going back to what I said, it's not about what you do, it's about how you do it and why you do it. So, you could, when you focus on a particular task, you will obtain so much from that. You might be here listening to me, but your mind might be somewhere else. This is fact. We're human beings. I might be talking to you, my mind is somewhere else. Yeah? But when you try your best to focus all of your senses on a particular task at hand, it's a completely different experience. And in the month of Ramadan, where you have the opportunity to receive multiplied reward for one single deed, or focus on that deed. So, for example, and I don't know if I mentioned this in the book, we know that feeding a fasting person, you get the reward of that person, right? So you may have a date, and for you it's just like it's time to break our fast. You just pass on the date. But I remember a talk I listened to when I was a new Muslim, and it stayed with me. Did I mention this in the book? I'm not sure if I did. Anyway. Where the speaker said, when you have that date between your fingers, before giving it to the person, just stop and speak to your Lord and really focus on the fact that you have a date and you have been promised that if you feed a fasting person, you'll get the reward of that fast. And just say, Allah, this is for you. And then give the date to the person. Simple. But you see how you're focused. You're focused in what you're saying to Allah before doing the good deed. You're focusing your senses on looking at the date, feeling the date, the person sitting next to you. You're internalizing the potential of rewards that you're going to get from such a deed. And not just the level of sincerity that you'll have in such a simple deed like that is far more than if you were to just, pass it on. Does that make sense?
What about intentions?
That's I mean that is the intention, isn't it? Because you're doing it for Allah. You're having that dialogue with your Lord before you do it. So I think I think that's what I would say.
And the last favourite chapter of ours was about dua, and I think one of the things that stuck out to me from the whole book was dua, because at the end of each chapter you give like a special tailored dua on that topic, and I think that was really, really refreshing to see, because sometimes, even in Ramadan, like you're making du'as, especially in Arabic, and you don't know what the meaning is, it can feel a bit like repetitive, or as if the connection is not there. So I think that was really, really valuable. So the question is, what would you say to somebody who maybe isn't making as much du'a as they could or should be? Like one thing to say about du'a to someone who's not making a lot of du'a.
How long do I have? I say that because I actually feel really emotional just thinking about it, subhanAllah. Dua is everything. Dua is absolutely everything. Where do I begin? No, because so much of my life is as a result of dua, and I'm very passionate about dua. You know, anyone's watched Honesty Talk, I mentioned dua. You read the book, as you said, there are 30 specific du'as in there. There's a whole chapter on dua. This book came about because of dua. You know, I would say, if to anyone that may not be making dua as much as they should or could, and I used to be one of them, it's probably because you don't know who you're making dua to. And I don't say that lightly. I think a lack of knowledge of who Allah is and who He can be for you and for your life results in a lack of dua. Because when you know who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, in his ability, in his love for you, in his willingness to answer your dua, in the way that he responds, in how merciful he is, in how perfect his decree is, you will fall in love with dua. It's not knowing. It's like a child. Yeah? A child who knows that they have a very giving auntie or a very giving uncle, will that child not go to that particular auntie or uncle and say, you know, when mum and dad is not looking, you know, can you give me this? Of course, because the child knows that particular auntie or uncle is extremely generous, spoils them rotten, and so there's no shame, there's no shyness in approaching that auntie or uncle and saying, give me this. Literally, not even please, give me this, I want this. Because they know. We're talking about the King of Kings. We're talking about the most generous, who the Prophet ﷺ has described that he is shy to return the hands of his servants empty when they ask of him. So I would say those who do not make dua enough, you need to get to know your Rabb. You need to get to know your Lord. Because when you know your Lord, you will fall in love with dua because that's your connection with him. And dua is not just asking, by the way, and I hope that I mentioned this in the book. Dua is not just asking for something. Dua is your line, direct line between you and your Lord. It's when you need, it's when you need to complain, it's when you just need to feel that he is with you as you're going through something. Dua is your dialogue with the one who knows you better than anybody else. And so yes, my answer is, and I say this firmly, get to know your Lord. When you get to know your Lord, you end up loving him. And when you love someone, you always want to be by their side, right? And dua is that which will enable you to be with Allah and to feel near him.
So go on to the next question. It's not related, but
so about your book, I realised it's quite a unique structure. It's not a general book about Ramadan, but more so a book where it's broken down. It's a bit personal. It's written in like a letter format. So what inspired you to do this?
So when Penguin approached me, they said they wanted it to have like a journal element. So they were quite clear on that right from the beginning. I knew I had a month, so I had to structure it. I had to make it easy for myself. And to be honest with you, it was after I made that dua, just Allah guide this process. I don't know what it's supposed to look like. I don't know what shape it's supposed to. It just kind of started coming together as I sat there in front of Victoria Park. It just 30 days of Ramadan, 29-30. Split it into 3 parts. I want to talk about the past, present, future. okay, how am I going to structure each chapter? It just kind of came together. But I didn't want it to be me telling the reader what to do, and I hope that hasn't come across. I wanted it to be its reflections. I want to share my story and the story of others. I want to reflect on the subject theme of that chapter. Then I want the reader to now go and think about themselves and their journey through this life and their relationship with Allah, and then reflect themselves. So I don't know if I've answered your question.
You have done. And whilst writing your book, what challenges did you face?
I remember I broke down crying one day, really badly actually. And it was in front of my children. May Allah bless them. And we sacrificed so much and are sacrificing so much for this to happen. I was exhausted, absolutely exhausted. And I was behind schedule, and the deadline was nearing, and I just broke. I started crying. I said to my daughter, my eldest, I said, I don't think I can do this. I'm so behind. I can't even think. I'm lacking in sleep. You know, a month. You know, it's not easy to write a book in a month. You know, whilst working pretty much full time, whilst tending to my children, home educating and cooking and cleaning and the rest of it. So that day was really tough. That was, I think, the greatest challenge. And then she said something to me. She put her hands on my shoulders and she looked at me and she said, "You have always taught me that I can." And I write about this in the book. She said to me, "You've always told me that I can, and now I'm telling you the same. You can do this." And that's all I needed. And so took myself back out to the coffee shop and started to write. That was the greatest challenge. The one at the beginning though was that I had seriously bad imposter syndrome. I just, oh my gosh, it's strange because I'm not, if you know my life, and obviously from this artist, you probably will know quite a bit, I'm not someone that's afraid to take risks. I became Muslim at a time when there weren't many reverts. Mashallah, now there are so many, alhamdulillah. I lived alone from a young age. I was living alone from the age of 17. I set up a charity from scratch. I lived on an Atlas mountain in a Berber village where no one spoke English, literally on top of the mountain for 7 years. I'm not afraid to take risks. But my gosh, when around September the 1st, when I began to start writing this, I just said, I remember calling a friend of mine. Has anyone heard of Fajr Literary here? No? Fajr Workers? Okay. So I called her and I said, I think they've got the wrong person. I really think they've chosen the wrong person. I'm not a good writer. I'm gonna end up submitting the draft and they're gonna say, what were we thinking? And I said, this is Penguin. Like, this is insane. I said, I can't, this is crazy. And she gave me the best advice. And she said, take Penguin out of the equation. Just take them out completely. She said, why are you doing this? What was the dua you were making before they approached you? And I said, I wanted to do it for my Lord. She said, focus on that. And as soon as she said that, there was a shift. And as soon as I focused on doing it for the sake of my Lord, it started to flow. As soon as I started thinking about Penguin, it changed. So after that, I was able to deal with, the thoughts that I wasn't good enough, and so that was another challenge.
Did Penguin give you like editorial freedom over everything that they have?
that was one of the first questions I asked. I said, yes, I did. I was very, I mean, I'm a very direct person anyway. I said, if you want me to write this book, it has to be in my voice. So I will write the first draft, but I don't want, because, you know, I share a lot of my writing on social media. I said, if you change my style, it's not going to be me. So I want to make sure that you're not going to change my voice. And also, how much freedom do I have? Because this is about my deen. So how much freedom do I have? They said, you have all the freedom in the world. So during the editing phase, my project editor, Sue, she came back and she said, she hardly changed anything, to be honest. And then it went to the copy edit phase, and she said normally there are red marks everywhere. There was hardly anything there. So alhamdulillah, they really gave me the autonomy to do my thing, which was good. And I think that's important, because at the end of the day, if this is for the Muslim audience and you have approached a Muslim author, then you've got to trust, you've got to trust that author to write there.
So that's good to know. And the last question from us is about SOAS. So while we have you, we thought, can you tell us a bit about what do you offer and why it's so important for Muslim community?
Yeah, so SOAS is a registered charity that was set up in 2011 that provides support for revert sisters in difficulty. So that's what we focus on. We recognise that, mashallah, there are so many organisations and charities that give dawah, that teach a new Muslim how to pray, how to read the Quran, and so on. But there was a gap in the community back then, and I still feel there is to this day, obviously apart from SOAS, whereby we don't talk about the difficulties that come with taking the Shahada. As a revert myself, and as a revert who went through some very, very difficult times in the first few years after I became Muslim, and did so alone, unsupported, I didn't want another revert sister to go through that. And so we deal with all the post-Shahada difficulties, issues with family. We had sisters that have found themselves homeless and nowhere to sleep that night. Sisters who find themselves subjected to harassment because they start wearing hijab at work. Sisters who are unfortunately taken advantage of by certain brothers in the community because they know they don't have a family backing behind them. So we deal with loneliness. So our mission is quite simple. We want to provide holistic support for revert sisters so that the zeal and passion they embraced Islam with can continue. We want them to enjoy their faith. We want them to strengthen themselves, to strengthen their relationship with Allah, and they just need support along that journey. And I have to emphasize that we're not a charity that supports revert sisters who are just new. We recognize that the difficulties post-Shahada can present themselves many, many years down the line. And so regardless of whether a revert sister has been Muslim for 2 weeks or 20 years, we're there for them. So that's what we do. And we've branched out to the Netherlands, so we have a branch in the Netherlands. We're just starting, we've actually started a project in Guinea-Bissau in West Africa for revert sisters there, so that's really exciting, that's something new. But yeah, that's what we do.
So practically what does that include? If someone is finding themselves homeless, would you
So we would ensure that they have someone to sleep at night. If it's a long-term issue, for example, we had a ex-Hindu revert sister who was also an asylum seeker. The Home Office had rejected her application and she had no recourse to public funds, so we've been supporting her long term. So, case by case, it kind of varies.
Thank you.
Can I just say that this is the 8th event, and these have been the best questions in my opinion, mashallah. Well done, SOAS. Alhamdulillah.
But yeah, I think audience Q&A now.
So the audience will have opportunity to ask any questions they have. If you feel shy enough, you don't want to like say it. Yeah, it'd be nice if you guys put your hand up and like ask the questions.
Yeah.
But if not, you can just type up this code on Slido and then I can read it out for you. But I've got a couple of questions. That I'm gonna ask. So you mentioned that you embraced Islam. So I just wanted to ask, how was your first Ramadan like, and your Eid as well?
My first Ramadan. I think my first Ramadan, I was just trying to get through the fact that I wasn't eating or drinking. You know, no eating or drinking. That was quite tough. I remember going to the masjid as well to pray Tarawih, and I wasn't connecting, but it was nice to be a Muslim. Eid, my first Eid, I spent part of it with the family of the sister who gave me dawah. That was nice. But then the rest of the day I felt incredibly lonely. And actually in Ramadan, I would see families kind of come together to break their fast. And I didn't have that opportunity, so there was this yearning, you know, to just to have that kind of Muslim family. So it was a mix. It's a mixture of, a mix of emotions. It was so long ago now, I can't remember the details.
And when you were mentioning the power of the dua, one thing that resonated with me is when you mentioned how we should get to know our Lord and Allah. What advice would you say, like, for us Muslims in practical steps for us to get knowing our Lord?
Yeah, I think first of all, study his names and attributes, get a book, join a course, you know, I think that's the starting point. But then as you're doing that, as you are learning about his names and attributes, the best way to get to know him is to apply it to your life. So when you might be studying the name Ar-Razaq, the one who provides, you know, and you know you apply it, you know, that, I don't know, student grant bursary, whatever you get, you know, you know that comes from Allah. It's not, you know, when he responds to a dua, that he is Al-Mujib, the one who responds, you know. So it's living with his names and attributes. That's the best way to know him, because I could tell you, got friends at the back, mashallah, I can describe Fatima. I could describe Fatima until the cows come home, right? As per my experience. But until you live with Fatima, until you interact with her and you see her and you speak to her, that's when you'll have a full experience, yes or no? So it's not just learning about who Allah is, it's recognizing him every day. He brought you here. Why has he brought you here? Why, out of all of the, I mean, who do you call them externals? Who are externals? Put your hand up. Okay, so again, internally, but those who are external to SOAS, why you? Why has Allah brought you here today? When someone else may have come across the poster for Allah, and then you think, what was I making dua for? What have I been making dua for? What has my heart been yearning for? And then maybe something that has been said today, or maybe even on your way home you'll come across someone, or something will happen, and then you recognize, this is my Lord. Do you see? So it's finding him, it's finding Allah Azza wa Jal in all circumstances in your life. That's the best way to get to know him, after obviously studying his names and attributes.
That's definitely something that's practical.
Yeah.
This is a question from the audience. It says, you talk about speaking to Allah before doing an act for him. How do you feel your connection with Allah has developed over the years?
My relationship with Allah has developed as a result of difficulties. I'm going to be straight. It hasn't, first of all, I don't think we arrive at, oh gosh, I'm now in a great place with my Lord. No, it's until the grave, right? And it fluctuates. Sometimes we feel close to Allah, sometimes we feel distant. And it's just on that point, it's us that is distant from Him. He is not distant from us. Yeah. But I would say it was through trials and difficulties and challenges that developed my relationship with Allah. Because, you know, I don't know if you'll all resonate with what I'm about to say. When you are, when you're going through something really, really hard, something really, really difficult, your dua is different. When you really want something, it's different, right, than when you're at a time of peace. And so my challenges and difficulties in life have led to a different level of dua, and that developed my relationship with God. So there is always purpose in your pain, and there is always khair in your difficulties. And you don't know if something you went through may be an opening for you, but also an opening for others. And I like to look at it as we're like one large intricate network, right? Whereby, and I'll just give you an example. When I was a new Muslim, I found myself homeless. At an age younger than you. But then that led me to say, I don't want another sister to go through that, which led on to solace, which then maybe has touched other people's lives. So what I'm trying to say is, the purpose may be such that it touches upon the qadr of someone else. I know I've kind of gone on it, but yeah.
No, it was just taking it all in, honestly. Another question that someone mentioned is,
Why is everyone shy here? MashaAllah, I want to talk to you.
another question someone mentioned here is, how can we create a sleep schedule during Ramadan in order to be productive and at the same time nourish our soul the best way possible?
I think part of Ramadan is accepting that your sleep is going to be interrupted and greatly reduced.
That's tricky.
I think it's accepting that. Naps, power naps, eating well. This may have something to do with it. I don't think I've cracked that, if I'm honest. I just go into Ramadan knowing for 30 days I'm going to be sleep deprived, and I just ask Allah to get me through. I think that's the only thing that I've done, is just turning to Allah and saying, just give me the energy to worship you, give me the energy to fulfill my responsibilities, just help me, because we will be sleep deprived. Yeah.
Is that Allah control?
Completely.
Anyone can look at some questions.
Thank you.
That's alright. So I say Jazakallah khair, like I really enjoyed it. When you've been speaking, like I'm literally getting goosebumps and crazy, and like I've heard you like speak on podcasts, but it's just mashallah, like when you're speaking here, it's just like a whole different experience. So Jazakallah khair, and Allah bless you. So I have two questions. One of them is like, it is about you, but like what was your journey kind of to Islam, or like with your relationship with Allah? Before you were Muslim, did you always feel like that there was Allah? Did you always feel that connection, or is that something that came after being Muslim? My second question is just like what piece of advice would you give to your like early 20-year-old, like early 20-year-old self? Yeah.
Quite deep questions, mashallah. Okay, so in answer to your first question, so I grew up in East London, in Poplar. Anyone know Poplar? Yeah, East London. And I grew up in a predominantly Bangladeshi area community. And there were two. I think I did this on Instagram. I spoke about it, but there were two instances where before Islam that I had with the Deen as a young child. So the first one was when I was 8 years old, and I lived on the second floor, and that kind of down on the ground floor opposite the road was a makeshift masjid. It was a container at the time. I think now, I drove past, I think they were building it or something. But anyway, so there was a makeshift mosque. And as a young child, I would lean on the windowsill and I could see through the entrance door into the prayer area. And for some reason, I found it incredibly fascinating. So I would lean on the the living room windowsill, and I would watch men in their, I don't know what they call it now. There's it's like a wrap skirt thing. What's it called? You're laughing.
A longi.
Longi, that's it. That's it. Yes, it is. Yes. Mariam's laughing. And they would go in, you know, with their flip flops and pile of flip flops outside. I was watching. I would find it fascinating. My mother and my father, unfortunately, didn't have a very happy marriage, and there were lots of fights, a bit of DV going on at home as well. And I remember one day they had a big fight, and I ran to my room and I closed the door, and I took my mum's. Prior to running into the room, I took my mum's shawl. She had been gifted by a Pakistani work colleague. And I threw it onto the ground. And I made sujood, imitating the men that I had seen make sujood in this mosque, and I would lean on the windowsill. And I said, God, make them stop. Help me. I was 8. And I remember it very, very clearly. SubhanAllah. That was my first connection with Islam. Yeah. Fast forward 2 years, on my 10th birthday, on the actual day of my birthday, one of my classmates, he was actually Muslim, Bengali. He ran over. He ran across the road from school to a local newsagent, and at the time it was like playing cards. To buy a set of playing cards, and he got hit by a truck and he died. This was on my birthday. School wrote to all of our parents and said, that obviously he had passed, they need to speak to us and comfort us and so on, and that his funeral would be in a couple of days. So there were a small group of non-Muslim children, obviously I was one of them, and I begged my mum. I said, please let me go. Let me go to the mosque to his funeral. So she said yes. I think I was maybe just one out of 2 non-Muslim kids that turned up for his janazah. And I had a Somali friend. I think everyone needs a Somali friend. I'm just saying. Yeah. One of my daughter's best friends is Somali. I just think everyone needs a Somali friend. But yeah, Layla. And I said to Layla, I said, so this was at school, prior to journeying from Poplar to Whitechapel to East London Mosque. I said, do you have a spare scarf? I was 10. And she said, yeah. And so she gave me a scarf, and we walked into the East London Mosque. And we prayed Dhuhr. Obviously, I now know. Yeah? And I went into sujood. And there was a feeling that I experienced, a closeness that I had experienced when I was 8 years old. And then we prayed the janazah prayer. That was my second experience of Islam. And I don't know, I feel like sometimes in life Allah creates these stepping stones, and we don't pay attention to them, we don't see the significance of them. But these were but I was always a very deep child anyway. I think I get that from my mum. She encouraged me to question, to reflect. She would write poetry about the sea and the trees and life, and she encouraged me to do the same. So I was always questioning. And I became a born again Christian. And I remember speaking to the pastor of the church, and I said to him, I need to ask you something. How is it that, I think I was about 13 at the time, I said, how is it that a man who ate, who, used the bathroom like we do, I think maybe I was a bit more direct at the time, how can can he be the son of God? How can he be God? I mean, you don't even know if it's the son of God, you know. And he said, you just have faith. And I left shortly after because I needed to be rationally convinced that it was the truth. And I think that's what attracted me to Islam. Was that your question? I know I can go off on a bit of a tangent.
I don't remember. I think so, yeah.
But yeah, so that's these were kind of like my experiences of Islam prior to becoming Muslim. But my journey to Islam, I mean, you know, to cut a long story short, at school I befriended. There was a sister who was at the time, you know, this is obviously the 90s. It was very rare to find someone in an abaya. You know, I now know, you know, obviously being Muslim, but she was like the only one. And I was popular and a bit crazy. But for some reason, we became very close friends. And she was also going through a very, very difficult time at home. Her mum was a victim of domestic, really, really bad violence from her father. But she was always have a smile on her face. And she was always positive. And I said to her, you know, how? Tell me, what is it? Here I am falling apart, and you know, my situation at home is not as bad as yours. Well, what's going on? You know, what is it? And she said, it's my religion, it's my faith. But I still felt that Islam was backwards. I felt it oppressed women. And so I started to look into Islam to find a contradiction so that I could save her. So that's why I started to look into Islam. And then as I began to, at the time it was cassettes, listen to cassettes, attend talks and read articles and so on, I started to become convinced. And it scared the living daylights out of me because I'm the type of person, when I do something, I do it 150%. Completely. So I knew that I was becoming convinced, so that means I would have to start covering. And I was really into looking good, you know. I would have to change my life, I would have to stop eating this, and you know. So I cut her out, I stopped reading and listening, and it was around the time of my GCSEs actually that I was revising, and for some reason I was just, my thoughts just kept hitting me about Islam, about what I had read, about what I was convinced by, and I took myself out for a walk, just where I lived. I was living in Plaistow at the time. Came to a road that I'd crossed many times before, and I watched people cross, and I couldn't cross the road because I had one thought in my mind: if I cross this road and I'm hit by a car and I die knowing what I know, what would happen to me? And so I ran back home, called my friend who I'd cut out of my life, and said, I believe I need to become Muslim. And then that was, I think it was a Saturday, I became Muslim on Monday. So that's the story. What was your second question?
It was the advice for your own 20-year-old self.
Oh gosh, how much time do we have? Look after yourself. Love your 20-year-old self. Love yourself. You don't need to please anyone. You need to seek the pleasure of Allah. Enjoy your youth. Don't try to grow up too fast. Yeah. So many things I would change, looking back. But then I also know that everything was as it was meant to be. It's funny because my daughter is coming to that age now, and she's very different to me. And I think she's got it right. She's do your healing now. If there's things that you need to heal from, do that now, whilst you're young, before you have responsibilities towards a husband or children or a career. Heal now. There's no shame in therapy. I think everyone needs therapy. Everyone, to some level, needs therapy. Get it now. Do your healing now. That's what I would tell them.
We've got time for one more question. Someone else have a question? 2 minutes.
You want to go first? Okay. So I kind of want to bounce off the other question actually. Did you have any sources that you went to? Because if you were trying to rationalize Islam, were there any like academic or books that you were kind of turning to, or what sources were you turning to kind of to challenge yourself, I guess?
There were a number of books, but actually I came into Islam through an Islamic political party.
Okay.
That's how I became Muslim. I don't know that particular Islamic group.
What would you recommend to a non-Muslim who's perhaps not looking to convert but just interested in Islam? And
honestly, I think the first step would be, regardless of your belief in God, is just to sincerely from the depths of your heart, that's the starting point. And I believe anyone who sincerely asks that will be shown the truth. That's the starting point. And then to find I would recommend a group of Muslims who understand the challenges of that journey from disbelief to belief, the questions that you may have, it's a very delicate journey. So to find a group of Muslims who you can ask any question to, who will understand that journey is very up and down, like it was for me. 1 minute I was very close, next minute I was absolutely terrified, you know. And then to ask questions and to read the Quran, keep asking God for guidance, and just ask until you feel like you can ask no more.
Jazakallah for a beautiful session. There's so many things you said that were so touching. I was fighting for my life not to cry. But I think my question is, and you did touch upon it already, but that I agree, like when you go through hardship, it's so much easier to be so sincere with that and turn to Allah. But do you have any advice? And I think as a society, we there's this problem of being on autopilot and just not being so active, like with your choices. You know, you're just doing things out of routine. How would you do you have any advice for being more active and being more present in times where life is going good and you don't have that kind of reason to turn to Allah?
Yeah, it's a very good question, inshallah. And I mentioned this in the first chapter.
Nice.
It's to carve out time, one-on-one, like alone time between you and Allah, and to safeguard that time. Like this is precious, where you are not with friends, you're not with social media, you're not with your phone during times of ease, because that was your question, where you just take yourself to a park, where you're surrounded by Allah's creation, or you just go for a walk and you connect with yourself, to insert it into your schedule. You will find your connection with Allah will inshallah develop during times of ease. I think we're on autopilot because we don't take time out. Just sitting and reflecting, just being. Allow yourself to be. Allow yourself to be with Him, and I think you will find, your relationship will develop, inshallah. But we've got to schedule it in, otherwise it won't happen. And this goes back to self-care as well. That's another thing I would say to my 20-year-old self. Schedule in self-love and self-care, otherwise it will not happen.
Say self-love care for you coming here. Honestly, they'll just I related to what you said, honestly, they'll just send me movies. I was just I don't want to cry. But it was just really very wholesome, honestly, if I have to say one word. Very intimate as well, and I can tell you just being authentically yourself, which I really appreciate it. And you're just saying it how it is, Inshallah, there'll be opportunity to purchase the book. and there will be a book signing happening, and there's refreshments at the back as well, so feel free to help yourselves.